give her a minute to see if she can get off mute. I know it can be tricky sometimes. And I do see her on the call. So Nancy, can you hear us? I saw you go off mute real quick. Yeah, Nancy, we still can't hear you, so. And Wes, while Nancy is working on coming off of mute, if you're on the call, do you want to provide some updates or review of schedule? We told all of you to mute, and now people can't get off mute, so.
Hello.
Oh, there you are, Wes. Perfect.
Hey, yeah. Hey, Nancy, just hit *6 if you dialed in. Typically, it doesn't seem to work too much when we dial in from our computer on the link. But so, anywho, for an update, the schedule is well. Right now, we're looking at the final testing over there at Aurora, Maine, and hope to keep that on track for final testing this afternoon and for cutover tomorrow. And so I know that's the 11th hour, and we're working with the Entrado team and trying to make sure all that gets buttoned up. Obviously, we want it buttoned up and to the full measure of the quality control that, what this is designed for. If, in fact, it doesn't pass the go, no-go this afternoon, we may have to slip Aurora to next Tuesday instead, just so you know. But then keep the rest of the schedule intact.
Okay, and we can talk specifically about the Aurora details. I'm sure all of us are really interested to see how all that testing is going. But from Aurora, so that's tentative for tomorrow still, so that will be the 9th. And then their backup is the following week.
Correct.
And then from the next one would be AdCom. And then
Correct.
4 of the Boulder PSAPs, Longmont, Boulder County, Boulder PD, and CU. So just from a schedule for these PSAPs in January, do the rest of them seem to be on track as well, or do you know yet because you haven't started the testing process with them?
Yes. So we're sticking to the schedule, the last schedule that was revised. So correct. So the next after Aurora backup will be just as you mentioned, AdCom and Bretza, and continue on down the line.
Okay. All right. So it's AdCom, then Longmont, Boulder County SO, Boulder PD, CU, and then in February it's Broomfield. Actually, Broomfield is February 4th, and then Douglas.
Right.
Okay.
Miss Nancy, can you guys hear me?
Yes, Nancy.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, Wes called it. You couldn't hear me when I was on my laptop, so I had to dial back in.
Great.
So yeah, the testing that we're doing now is the end-to-end CenturyLink network testing, as well as the testing into Aurora. So once that is completed, then the rest of the pre-migration testing should be straightforward.
Okay, and when you talk about pre-migration testing, is that applicable across all the different PSAPs or just specific for this one deployment?
No, all PSAPs, we will bring the ESInet equipment out and schedule a date to do pre-migration testing. It's typically a couple days before migration.
Okay. So from I guess let's go to the group. Any questions on the schedule specifically for the January, February PSAPs?
Hey, this is Rob Greer with the City of Aurora. I just able to dial in. I had to go through a different number, I guess.
Hi, Rob. Thanks for joining us.
Hey, Kim, just a quick question. Rob did have an update. Did you want to wait that for item C there?
Yep, exactly. We'll tackle that. I want to make sure that we don't have any issues with the scheduling right now.
Perfect. Okay.
Okay, great. So placed orders. From CenturyLink's perspective, for any of the PSAPs cutting in January or February, do you have any order issues or anything that you need to tackle on those items?
No, actually, we don't have any issues January through March at this point. So it's all good.
I just want to remind the PSEPs that we're installing 2 new circuits for the ESInet equipment. So over the next weeks and months, you'll be hearing from technicians that want to gain access to install those circuits.
Did we lose anyone?
This is Wes. It kind of went dark
I know.
there,
All of a sudden it got quiet.
Might have.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Now we can.
Oh, now we can.
Okay. All right. Yeah, I think I leaned on my mute, so I apologize. For the PSAPs that are cutting in January, are the circuits installed for the rest of them already?
They've been issued and they're in progress, but yes, a handful of them have been installed.
Okay. Okay, great. All right, if there's not any questions on the orders or the schedule, then we will move on to the status of the install. So love to hear from you, Scott and Rob, from your perspective on how things are going in Aurora.
Yeah, this is Rob. We Intrado and CenturyLink were here yesterday. We had some issues. They weren't getting some BPGs or something from the CUGs. So another Intrado tech came in. He had I guess he had some circuits crossed over. We got everything, seemed to be up and running about 3 o'clock yesterday. We did some test calls and they were working. Intrado's here today, testing out all the transfers to the star codes, and that's kind of where we're at. Intrado told me that they did have issues with our backup circuit, and apparently I guess they did get that working last night. I was unaware of it until Intrado told me this morning when they talked to I think Nancy, and that's kind of where we're at. I haven't heard anything different. If we're still going live tomorrow between 5 and 6 a.m.
And
Well, this is Wes and Nancy. I don't mean to jump in here, and Cindy Berry, by the way, is going to be the program manager. She just had to leave. Yeah, Rob. We got all hands on deck on that now, and I think we're going to cross that bridge for tomorrow. Making that decision today about 1:30 or so.
Okay.
For Intrado, they're buttoning up that last egress that goes up to Longmont, and so we've got all hands on deck right now. But we want to make sure that everything's 100% before we go. But we'll know earliest, maybe 1:30, 2 o'clock at the latest, I would guess.
Okay, so we'll know for sure at that time if we're going to go live or not.
Correct.
As the pre-migration test plan, has it been completed or still working that?
Nancy, I'll let you talk to that. I saw that Cindy just left and Kevin's on there. I don't have myself the update.
They're working through it right now, so that you're correct. They're doing all the star code transfers right now. We had some delays on a cross-connect circuit on one of the egresses to Longmont, which shouldn't be an issue for all the succeeding PSAPs because it'll already be up. But it is pushing us to the 11th hour with you. That's been resolved, and they're going to do that circuit final acceptance here in an hour or so, and then through the failover testing. So if all of that goes well, we should be on track. But they are working through completing the test plan. We made the decision to stop about a few minutes after 4 yesterday because we assumed that all the PSAPs didn't want us testing our star code transfers during rush hour. So we decided to stop testing and resume here this morning at 9 o'clock so that we didn't annoy everybody.
this is Kimberly, a question on the pre-migration test plan. Rob, Scott, did you guys get a copy of that? And you have a copy that you're following through with the text?
I have a copy of it. I mean, through the email, but I mean, I don't have like what they're filling out and what they've completed. No.
Would you, is that, I mean, that's something I know I probably would want to see is as things got noted or that's open or that wasn't completed successfully, just the follow-up action items. Is that something, Nancy West, that you're able to provide PSAP's authorities if they request it? Kind of like a
Absolutely.
document share?
We should be referring, actually, typically would be on site the day or two before cutover, going through that up to cutover and checking off those points on that checklist.
Yeah,
So
I think that would be important to share.
Scott, go ahead.
I just think that would be important to share again, especially since we're the first to go live. It would be a good lessons learned, not only for CenturyLink, but for the other PSAPs that are upcoming.
Absolutely.
So this is Rob again. Are we going to have any CenturyLink techs here today going through this, or I haven't seen anybody but the Entrado guys here this morning?
Well, it's an Entrado action item right now for them doing that testing. So that was decided yesterday that our tech didn't have to be on site right now because it's at this point it's all Entrado. But to follow up on that, to go over that checklist, we'll make sure that gets done.
Yeah, and Rob, I've been on the bridge monitoring the testing. I didn't come down this morning. I certainly can if you need me to. This is Cindy. But we can make sure we go through and get you the documented pre-migration test plan and what kind of what happened and what the results were for each case.
Okay.
And I have the questions you and I kind of just jotted down yesterday when we were talking around how the failover back out would work and time frame for that. I think I got some answers to ship over to you this morning.
Okay, appreciate that.
So I have a question about the migration test plan and just testing in general. Are you doing a load test as well to ensure that as many SIP sessions that they've ordered are able to hold, one per SIP session, one call per SIP session, and then what happens after they've reached their max SIP session to watch that roll at the IP selective router to a PSAP that hasn't been cut?
I'm pretty sure that's part of it, and to make sure that default rollover is covered. That's loaded into the internal checklist that we go through. So I'm confident that's being covered, but so I'll make sure that is being done, and that feedback is given to Rob and Scott, et cetera.
And that number of SIP sessions that they've ordered that they're paying for, can they support that many 911 calls, simultaneous 911 calls? So just that load check, I think, is critical. And I'm not sure, I haven't seen your migration test plan to know if that's one of the action items.
Yeah, understood.
Okay. Rob, Scott, do you guys have anything else as it relates to the status of your install that you want to cover? I have a question about time, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. Historically, cuts usually happen around 2 or 3 in the morning. So I was just curious, is the time did you guys select the 5 or 6 a.m. time frame? And
this is Rob. Yeah, I selected the 5 to 6. I mean, they asked me what time we want to cut. We usually always cut over before 6 a.m. It's kind of our standard. I mean, if you'd rather cut over at 2 a.m., I mean, I'm okay with that if you guys want to be there that early.
Well, this is Kimberly with LIDA, so I don't have a say in that. I was just curious if that's the PSAP authority's choice, that's fine. I guess the question would be then to CenturyLink if that's a time that can be established between the authority and CenturyLink and Entrado, if somebody wants to go earlier than that. Because I know up here specifically, rush hour on I-25, we get busy at 5.
Okay, Kimberly, I know that is an option to move that up. Typically, I think the beginning of the maintenance window on that has started as early as 3 a.m. I'm not sure about 2, but in the past I've done the cuts at 3 and 4 o'clock in the morning fairly routinely, so this would be no different.
Okay. So just for everybody, that's an option to work with CenturyLink on the times too. Anything, Rob, Scott, you feel like you guys need that you're not getting or that you want some attention on?
Well, I just wanted to see that pre-migration plan, and like yesterday, I was kind of left in the dark when the CenturyLink techs left, and I was sitting here waiting for them, and they didn't let me know that they left, or they didn't tell me that the circuit was up. I sent out a couple of emails asking like what the status was, and I'm just now finding out the status on this phone call.
Yeah, that's
Rob,
pretty concerning.
Rob, this is Cindy. I'll reach out with you and make sure you have my contact information. So going forward, I'm taking over kind of program management, and Nancy and team are still helping and doing a lot of stuff. But I'm going to try and kind of fill that role of giving you all a single point of contact to go if you have questions or need anything, and I will absolutely track down the answers for you and make sure you get them.
Thanks.
So I'll make sure you have my contact information today. If you guys ever run into that situation again, feel free to give me a call. But I'll try and make sure that you have the info and don't have to chase us down.
Well,
Cindy,
it's a good time to get you introduced, Cindy, in fact, for the group. Cindy Berry came over to us from Entrada, where she was a program project manager for, Cindy, wasn't it like 17 years, something like that?
I was with Entrada for 15 years.
So she has a wealth of experience in cutting these ESInets over with the Entrada solution and elsewhere. It's applicable to other things as well. So we are extremely pleased to have Cindy Berry on board, and we will share that information with the whole group and her contact information. And she will be on point for, obviously, these cutovers and disseminating information.
So Wes, and Cindy, if I can just get your phone number right now, I'm going to put it in the spreadsheet, but then that way Rob and Scott, they have it immediately. So if you can just share your number, that would be great.
Cindy, you want to go ahead and your contact information?
Yes, except I don't have my desk phone memorized yet. Let me start with my cell phone while I try and figure out where my desk phone number is. My cell phone is 303-520-3210.
Okay.
And let's see. How do I see?
Well, and you can just email that information, your desk phone number, over to me. That way I can plug in your email address as well. But now that we have your cell phone, that's great. So Rob and Scott have a immediate point of contact. So it's 303-520-3210.
Yes.
Okay, and then for everyone's benefit on that discussion item, ESInet spreadsheet we have, the second tab is CTL contact information, and that's where I will be plugging in the rest of Cindy's information. So if you need help and you need to try and reach somebody, those numbers should be there for you. Okay, I'm ready, Cindy. Go ahead.
My desk phone is 720-888-5405.
Perfect. All right, I've plugged that in as well. That's great. But I think to Rob's point, having that information and better communication, almost hey, we're releasing everybody today from the site. Here's the outstanding items and going through what's pending, what's going to be tackled tomorrow when people will be back on site. Are they going to be back on site? Are they going to be remote? Here's the bridge information if their work's going to be happening remotely. That's critical project information for something of this scope. So Cindy, is that something we can put on you as an action item, working with each of us to have daily wrap-ups before people leave?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, and then you will also send that pre-migration plan, the status, the items that are still open that the team's working on over to Rob when we're off this call?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Aurora, anything else?
This is Rob. That's all I have. Thanks. Do you have anything, Scott?
Yeah, Kim, I have an item that kind of ties into 4A, so it's up to you. If you want, we can just kick that off, or I can go ahead and share it. It's up to you.
No, I think that's real quick though, Scott. I think that's great. Just does anybody have any other questions for Aurora about the status of their install before we move into new business? Okay, great. Scott, go ahead. We'll move into 4A.
So I believe that this is an issue we already have, not an issue, but an item that's already on the sheet, just talking about future state with ESInet and PSAP rollovers. I just want to let you guys know that, of course, logically it makes sense since Aurora is the first PSAP to go live. We will be our own default on the ESInet. But one of the things Wes and I talked about is that as other PSAPs start rolling or getting deployed, that is something I think we're going to have to talk about sooner rather than later, because the first handful of us will need to know who that rollover is going to be. Because, for example, if AdCom is going live second, really AdCom and Aurora's only choice is to default route to each other. And that's not current practice. Currently, we both default route to Arapahoe.
Well, and Scott, if I can just jump in, I think that's opposite of information that we received previously from CenturyLink.
Well, and I'll let Wes chime in, but yes, he reached out to me last Thursday. I had assumed all along that default routes would stay in place over the selective routers.
Right.
And so when I found this out, I had a bit of a panic myself. So yeah, I'll turn it over and let Wes give his input on that as well.
Yep. Hey, and Cindy, jump in. My understanding is the default route is only for the ESInet wireline type calls. And obviously, since Aurora is number one and the only one that's going to be on the ESInet here for a short period of time, they would serve as their own default. But later on, obviously, when more PSAPs come online, we would probably need to have a discussion, of course, of a PSAP for the state that's a fairly large center be the default. And again, it's extremely unlikely when this is ever going to be needed. That's my understanding. It's very rare.
I would agree. It's different levels of default that we're talking about.
I was going to say, yeah, let's break this. Yeah, we need to break this up, because what is being stated is from Wes, and then what was stated from Scott are a little bit different as we relate to defaults. So let's talk about
the question that came up last week was more of a global default on the ESInet specifically. If for some weird reason a call was introduced into the ESI network and we were unable to determine where it should go or who it belonged to, what do we do with it? So like a global default on the ESInet. And because Aurora is the only one live, we decided that they should, at least initially, with their agreement, be the recipient of default. Understanding that as we bring more steps up, we might want to revisit what that kind of global level default would look like. But your existing defaults, one of the star codes they were testing this morning was the star code that would, I think, route to Aurora backup, because Aurora backup is not man, would fail over to Arapahoe. So all of those defaults and failovers should be the same as what you have today and are part of what's being tested.
Okay, so
so this is kind of a different,
Yeah, let's break this down just a little bit. So global default, a 911 call enters the system today. Nobody on an ESInet. So a 911 call enters a system today. The default routing is defined at a local level.
So let me describe what scenario would enter that default route. So cellular phones can't do it. They have their own default routing. So if a cellular, let's say an unregistered cell phone, makes a 911 call, the cell phone towers, they have their own mechanism. So it's not going to be a cell phone call. It's going to be a wire line from a central office, and we don't know if that does not. Something's wrong with it. Something says a 911 call was generated from a central office, from a location on a wire line, and we don't know where to send it. That is really, I can't think of a scenario where that really happens, but we have to accommodate that situation.
And how do you accommodate it in today's environment? Where do you send those calls?
Based on the central office, we send it to the PSAP. So it comes in on certain ES trunks.
Mm-hmm.
We base it on the ES trunks going from the local central office to the selective router. Every PSAP, it'll go to the default PSAP for those ES trunks. And we lose that capability. But it would be a landline call with no Annie or Allie. And I don't know how often that really occurs, but we don't know how to route it.
So you have to pick one PSAP to send it to by default.
Right.
So, and I think just maybe that's part, and I'm speak for myself, maybe that's part of the confusion, is because we keep using the term default route, which from my old days means something completely different. I think what we're saying is the PSAP of last resort, which is the system has no idea where to send it, therefore this is going to be the last place it's going to try and send it.
You know, that's a good verbiage. That's a very good verbiage, a PSAP of last resort. We don't know where this goes, so we need someplace. And it would, like I said, it would only be landlines, or that only
ESInet.
And only on, it would have been up after it's been migrated. So right now, only Aurora systems are being migrated, so.
Right. So just to clarify then, the terminology we've always used before for saying default routes and backup centers, those would still be in place and functioning as they do today. So we would still go to Arapahoe County and the AdCom would still go to Arapahoe County. But as other people come on board onto the ESInet, from now until later it's decided, Aurora will be the PSAP of last resort.
Yes.
Okay, so I think that's great information. I appreciate that, and this is something new for the group, and I think this is something that we will keep on our agenda as an old business item so we can continue to discuss, do we need to change that arrangement as other PSAPs cut and migrate over to alleviate that from Aurora? So is it Denver, for example? You know, do we move and shift that over to Denver? I see Athena on the call, so we'll just keep her on mute while we just volunteer Denver eventually to be that.
Exactly.
But we'll just keep this on the agenda for the ESInet user group to contemplate as we have more PSAPs to pick from. So I appreciate you guys breaking it down and walking through exactly what this means, because when we start talking about default routing, we immediately go to, we're busy at the selective router, all of our SIP sessions are full, all of our trunks are full. That's not what we're talking about. It's truly, I have a call coming in. And as Kevin described, we lose those ES trunks in this ESInet environment. So I appreciate the breaking it down on how it's different in the new environment, so we have that education background. So any questions on that? That's a great issue to bring forward. Okay, other new items of business for the group from the PSAPs. And as you come off mute, I'm going to go ahead and just ask a question on one to give you guys time to *6 to unmute or unmute on your computer to bring up your items. But one question I have for CenturyLink is the use of Intrado. And this is, I guess, a CenturyLink / Intrado question. So I allocated one of our dedicated 911 tech to go down to Aurora so he can assist Aurora's Intrado tech, and these are techs that maintain and manage on the CPE side, on our side of the demarcation. And really the burden of all the testing that has taken place has been on those CPE technicians, and I believe they're down there today doing the rest of that testing and work. In environments where you don't have an Intrado CPE deployment, and I think that could be Broomfield, I'm not sure what CPE Broomfield has. What's that relationship going to look like for Intrado, CenturyLink, and a different CPE solution? Are you still going to have that type of heavy involvement from Intrado? and then you fold in that third vendor, or how does that relationship work for those upcoming PSAPs that are not Viper?
I can address what I expect, if you want me to, Wes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so we do have, this is the testing, the pre-testing. So we did have some changes, some variations that we had to make on the network. So we did have Intrado there from, let me designate it the network. The network Intrado was there. So we did have that. We did have CenturyLink techs there. We were programming the XL probes. And so that was at the testing. Now, in the bulk of the testing, it would be a conference bridge where we would have people doing the test migration sites. I don't know how to program the CPE. I mean, as far as I say that generically. I do have some idea on Viper. People know I know some on Viper, but we let the CPE vendors do the CPE part of it. We have people on the call because it's all over the country. We have people from Florida, Minnesota, and all kinds of people on this conference bridge who touch our network. And so I don't anticipate having a CenturyLink person there other than doing the actual probes and stuff that we're actually have responsibility for. For the actual conversion type programming, I anticipate most of that be on the conference bridge with the local CPE vendor.
And then also with the Intrado, not Intrado serving in that capacity of CPE provider, but Intrado serving in a capacity for their portion of the network project?
Yeah. Yes, we'd still be working with the Intrado team to test out the ESInet and PSAP circuit pieces and the CPE vendor.
Okay, and so I guess one concern I get just for everybody to make sure that they have keyed up their CPE provider and that their CPE provider, if it's outside of Intrado, has enough time and bandwidth to make sure that they're there for the duration of the testing and then even the cut. But the other piece of it, a concern I have, would be enough field resources that Intrado is allocating for this project, because early on in the project, we were told that this Intrado group that's working on the project is separate from the CPE folks that are maintaining our CPE side, and coming down to doing a cut, it's not. It's been the same folks doing at least the work hands-on, and maybe they're just serving a dual role, but just wanted to make sure that there's enough resources engaged from the Intrado side that isn't going to be pulling from the CPE support side, trying to stand these additional deployments up. Does that make sense?
From what I witnessed yesterday, I didn't see I didn't see any crossing over. They were on the conference bridge, they were talking to each other. They were working on solutions with the Intrado people, the network Intrado people. Overall, I mean, they were trying different things. They were troubleshooting together, took out options, added options, and did different things. Ultimately, they put everything back to the way it was standard, and they did find, and it doesn't matter, I mean, it's a work in progress. I mean, just because you typed it in once and it didn't work doesn't mean it was a wrong setting. Sometimes, because of how network equipment is, sometimes you have to take it out and put it back in again. And it wasn't but
to her point, one of the two techs that was on site yesterday for Intrado was her CPE tech.
Right.
Intrado. And to that point, that's where I can help out, because I know a lot of those guys, so I can go, annoy some old coworkers and ask them questions, Kim, and make sure that we've got the right resources to not impact so if you guys have something with your CPE you need worked on, it's not getting pushed because they're doing one of these ESInet cuts.
And that's, I mean, I approved him to go down there, and I think it benefits all of the Viper areas to have multiple eyes see what's going on, especially for the first cut. But as it relates to those resources, that's exactly the point, is we don't want to leave everybody else on one CPE side to have the same resources working on these various ESI cuts around the state. And so that would just be one of my concerns, is making sure that Entrado has enough people and the right people engaged, that they're not pulling from the CPE support side of the house to stand up all of these ESInet deployments in Colorado. They should be using different techs versus the ones that are supporting the CPE side.
Yeah, as far as I observed yesterday, the CPE people did not touch the network Entrado equipment. They offered, and we didn't need them to. But the Entrado network people did their own work in isolation of the CPE.
Okay, great. Does anybody have any other new business they wanted to bring up for the group now that we've given some time to come off mute? Okay, well, I think then that will close new business. And Daryl, if you don't mind toggling back to the agenda, I think then we are on to open discussion. So does anybody have anything else that they want to bring up to the ESInet user group?
Hey, Kimberly, this is Patty.
Hi, Patty.
Actually, I was trying to get off mute on the last one. I had a quick question for Rob and Aurora. I'm just wondering if they're planning on testing the cell calls. It's our understanding that Entrado's using CenturyLink's test plan, and I don't think that was included in there. So I was curious about that. And then the second question is, down the road, I'm just curious, will we be able to transfer admin lines when we go to the, I don't know what word we're going to use now, the routing or the default PSAP?
When you ask transfer admin lines, are you asking if you can transfer 911 calls to admin lines? Or admin lines?
No, if we can transfer admin lines outside of the PSAP, yeah, to that default out of the authorities call group to another authority.
So sometimes you guys will get default or phase 0 routed calls to the admin line, and you want to be able to transfer them if needed to another jurisdiction, right? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, I'm just curious in the future if that'll be part of it, the ability to transfer those admin lines as well.
To 911, Patty, are you thinking across the star code? Is that what you're asking? Because, I mean, transferring admin lines would be in the CPE, but if you're wanting to take an admin line to a 911 star code?
Well, perhaps. Just to another, maybe it's that global default center that we're talking about.
So a PSAP, I like Rob's definition, PSAP of last resort. Let's say we do get a call from the PSAP, it comes in on the ESInet, they get the call, they have it. They can transfer that to any jurisdiction. Since it is a 911 call, it's on the ESInet, a normal star code will work. They can also transfer it to 10-digit numbers. Does that answer the question?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, and then her other question was, in your test plan, are you testing 911 calls from cell phones, not just doing the landline testing?
I don't know. I'm looking at it. I did not witness. They were doing the testing today. We did the high levels. Once the call
it's not in the CenturyLink test plan. I'll reach out to Ken and Entrado and talk with them about it because it would generally be on their side.
I already asked Ken about the wireless testing, and he said it cannot be performed in a test environment. We'll have to test it when we migrate.
Can you explain and elaborate a little bit why we wouldn't be able to generate from Intrado, inside Intrado, into the ESInet to make sure that the routing is okay for wireless calls?
I'm not a technical person, but the reason that we asked for the POTS line for testing is we can point that POTS line to the new trunks to make sure that they come in adequately. We have no way to point a wireless telephone number to the new trunks.
Okay.
So yeah, once we migrate over in the morning, we definitely will be making a lot of cell calls to test these.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, because that would have to include different carriers and from different parts of your jurisdiction as well.
Right.
Yeah, because there's multiple providers out there.
And I'm assuming the same is going to be true for your internet lines, any of the VoIP calls coming in.
Yes.
Okay.
So Kim, I'm sorry, but going back to the earlier discussion then, so let's just say hypothetically that some specific carriers' 911 calls are not being routed to the ESInet. So CenturyLink then, would those then go to the default route, in our case to Arapahoe County?
No. So that we would have to find them, but they would be, because they have the default routing, their own default routing now. They do their default routing different than landlines.
Right. So I guess my question is, how would we know? Because if we're on, a user in Boost Mobile in some remote area of the state, how would we ever know that their 911 call didn't come through to us?
Well, what's the caller going to experience? Is it just going to be a ring, no answer?
Right.
I don't know enough how to answer that.
Right.
I guess
we're not taking out the legacy network obviously right away. It still exists, for one. But the way I think the way the network is set up, the calls, once they hit into the CenturyLink kind of network, they're all going to be forced down this ESInet, all the wireless VoIP landline. I don't think they need to really make any changes on their side. The way the change is occurring, all the traffic is just moving from that kind of selective router standpoint. So I'll go back to my Intrado friends and have some more conversations with them.
Well, I think a couple of questions would be if a wireless call comes in and it can't be delivered for whatever reason over the ESInet, we need to understand what the caller is going to experience and that behavior. And I understand you're not bringing down the camera trunks. However, they're not presenting camera trunks any longer into Aurora's system. And
they still go through our selective routers. So our only entry point is the selective router. They're going to be handled the same as they are now. So I'm walking through this. I'm just trying to say I'm walking through this right now.
So the carriers or their providers are terminating the calls to the same place they do today. We're changing at that point where we pick up the call and send it.
So I think that goes back to my question then, which is, if it's still operating as it is today, when you guys cut over Aurora tomorrow to the ESInet, are our old camera trunks going to be put into a make busy state? Because otherwise, if they're not in a make busy state and that wireless carrier is trying to deliver the call and it still gets routed out by the selective router to the camera trunk, it's just going to ring indefinitely and no one will know because we don't have the camera trunks at the center. But if they're in a make busy state, then they should default route to Arapahoe County, and then at least Arapahoe would be able to let us know.
We can put it that way.
I think you have to.
Yeah, we'll make sure.
Because, I mean, I can just imagine some wireless caller and it rings, and no one is ever going to know that it's ringing.
Right. I'm just writing a note to make sure that that's in the plan to busy out the camera trunk. But yeah, essentially for wireless and VoIP providers, nothing is really changing. They're terminating calls, or their provider, Intrado, Contact, whatever, is terminating calls to where they do today. It's just when we pick up the call and get it to you, we're transitioning that route from that point to you.
So, if I can, as I understand it, the wireless carriers and VoIP carriers, they're still routing the calls to the selective router. At the selective router, you are taking certain calls, the ones originating in Aurora, and routing them to Intrado instead of over the camera trunks directly to the PSAP. And so, how do you know which calls to route, and are there in fact errors that can occur there in that routing? Because that seems to be where the problem would occur.
The person who does that programming is not on this call. We can reach out to her, and we do have a complex translations person who owns this project, and we can actually talk to her. I mean, they know this very well, and it's just that the people who do that work aren't on this call, and I understand that you're sensing that we don't know, but we do have people that absolutely do this, and we can bounce this off of her and maybe address this in another time what exactly happens.
Well, I think, Kevin, that would be great, but I think it should be addressed today with Rob and Scott so they know and they have some comfort going into their cut. So if you can circle back, and whether that's just a call with them or some follow-up prior to your go, no-go would be...
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
I'll
Scott, with that...
Because, yeah, wireless has its own list of ESRKs and ESNs, and usually dedicated circuits coming into those points that identify, that are going to say these are calls terminating to Aurora. And we need to take these calls terminating to Aurora and move them to this new network. So they should be easily identifiable. And in our complex translation group, that's on her list as part of the swing of traffic, to swing all that traffic as well.
And that's routing of the PNEs to Intrado instead of directly to the PSAP?
Yeah, it was, the call, yeah.
I don't want to get into great a detail because I'm inevitably going to answer incorrectly. I do know I was on the calls trying to design that, and what pretty much happened was that Kevin Newton was not able to keep up with the conversation. They talk at a high level that I can't follow, and that's the honest truth. There's a lot involved, and it is configured and planned for, but we would have to bring the complex people in that conversation.
I will and the Intrado team and get you guys an overview today. But like I said, I spent a decade or more doing the wireless work at Intrado. So I can kind of high level translate it for you. But yes, essentially, it's going to look just like all the other calls from your network standpoint. And we're going to intercept them at that selective router and then route them in the ESInet to Aurora.
Okay, so I think circle back with the Aurora team today before your go, no-go, and then the rest of this group, obviously, that's Boulder, that's asking the question, and they cut right after AdCom.
Right, we should get at all kind of a high level of the various voice, wireless, how all those calls really will transverse the network and how we identify and separate them.
That would be
and get them routed to you correctly.
That would be great. Thank you. All right. Anything else for we're in open/public comment, open discussion right now. Anything else for the meeting before we adjourn? Okay, great. Well, if you do have anything that comes to mind, don't hesitate to email me and I can add that to the list and then circle back with CenturyLink to get you answers. Especially, obviously, we care about everyone and your concerns across the state, but a lot of attention for those of you that are cutting in January and February. I mean, you're up next. So if you have something pressing, let's get it out there so we can get it answered for you right away.
And
so
Kim,
yes, go ahead.
We'll let you guys know today after we find out about the go, no go, email out.
Yeah, that would be wonderful, Scott. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Well, good luck if you cut. We'll be thinking of you at 5 a.m. if it's a go. So
thank you.
It's going to go great. It's going to be an easy day tomorrow. But if there's anything else, just again, email me and I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting then at 10:56. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all. Bye.